Hello, my name is Bruna, and in this pilgrimage project, I'll be talking about Ivone Gebara. The contents of this presentation includes the period, location, and context in which she lived, a background of her life in conversation with the Christian tradition, contributions of Gebara's work to both local and global Christianity, the nature of her work, and a closer look into some of her major ideas. So essentially, this presentation explores the life and work of Ivone Gebara in the religious context. She contributed extensively to the feminist theology and challenged many male-centered approaches to spirituality, especially focused on how the local context impacts on people's spiritual lives. So let's dive into Gebara's timeline. She was born in 1944 in São Paulo, in a middle-class Catholic family who were Lebanese immigrants. During that time, Brazil was under an authoritarian regime, and the population lived in constant fear due to the oppressive conduct of the government. During Gebara's childhood, which she mentions in her book Waters from My Well, Reflections on Experiences of Liberation, 2004, she talks a lot about Hika, a black Catholic devotee that worked for her family at her house cleaning and cooking. Hika dedicated her life to God, Jesus, and the Virgin Mary, and therefore never married. They were very close, and she tells how Rika had influenced her in the search for freedom, but a freedom according to her own understanding and context. Later on, Gebara entered a Catholic university in São Paulo to study philosophy. And there she met nuns that were engaged in political activism, which was when she started to strengthen the desire to fight for freedom. She realized that she didn't want to build a traditional family because this would also mean to conform to husband expectations, given the highly patriarchal society in which she lived, which could possibly stop her from becoming who she has become. When she was 22 years old, she joined the Augustinian congregation of Sisters of Our Lady, with the mindset that religious life would bring the freedom that she always longed for. After studying theology in Belgium, Ivone Gebara went back to Brazil exactly when the liberation theory movement was starting, and she became theology and philosophy professor at the Institute of Theology in Recife, northeastern Brazil. Nowadays, she continues to live in Recife and works towards the minorities' empowerment in religious contexts. So, let's dive into Recife's background, as it was in that place that she developed most of her work. So, Recife, like the majority of cities in northeast Brazil, is victim of human traffic, illicit drug traffic, domestic violence, criminality, lack of investment from the government, and gender discrimination. Gebara's outreach in Recife was quite impactful, in and out of the academic scenario. In fact, she was in charge of the theological foundations of community development projects that envisioned the upbringing of social change through educational programs. This, again, highlights how she strongly believed in the power of education. By following her activist trajectory, we can see how hard it was for her to fit into the pre-existing theologies. In fact, the Vatican closed or ordered the closing of operations for the Institute of Theology in Recife, the place that she worked at, which brought great disappointment to Gebara in terms of the church's resistance to change and equality. At this point, she was part of the liberation theology movements. And one of the most important aspects of the liberation theology movements across Latin America was the emphasis on local context and communities in an attempt of giving the voice and seeing religion and spirituality through the lenses of the minorities. In this case, both poor and females. There is a focus on implementing Christian-based communities to support everyday life oppression and guidance. However, she started to notice the constant patriarchal views of her liberationist peers. which she didn't agree with. Gebara actually called them out, saying that they failed to acknowledge the way patriarchal relations are rooted in the domestic life. And she moved on to a feminist liberation theology. And later on, she started to write books and give speeches on ecofeminist theology. So, this type of theology integrates the relationship between women, the earth, and the divine. When you invite people to think, you are inviting revolution. This is a famous phrase from Ivone Gebara, which characterizes the nature of her work. She always aspired for change and equality. Gebara wrote many different inspirational books and gave many empowering speeches as well. So here are selected three of her most influential contributions. In her book, Longing for the Running Water, Ecofeminism and Liberation, she poses an approach to the ecofeminist epistemology. She explored central concepts such as the Trinity. The book seeks to pose reinterpretations of some key elements of the Christian tradition in order to reconstruct and reconnect to Earth's body, the human body, and our relations with all living bodies. She describes how the traditional philosophies presented by the Church many times are not even false, but are biased and limited. In her book Out of the Depths, Women's Experience of Evil and Salvation, she is deeply concerned with the matter of inclusion. She explores individual perspectives of women who experience genuine oppression and gives voice to them. She focuses on the most difficult experiences from real women and uses personal witness as the fool for her book. And in her book, Mary, Mother of God and Mother of the Poor, from Ivone Gebara and Maria Clara, they focus on what was not said about women and the interpretation and reading of the scriptures. Mary is described to have restored and reintegrated women's body to the mystery and divinity of God, as well as focusing on her particular outreach. What human experience is described by Trinitarian language? This is the question Gebara posed initially when bringing up the conversation on the nature of the Trinity. In an attempt to de-theologize the Trinity, she brings it into the context of everyday life. She explained how the Trinity is a language used to characterize and express the experience of transcendence, while it reinforces the oneness of the relationship between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. She describes how this language is helpful in maintaining the connection and trust in the non-material world. And here's another quote from her. The Trinity is an expression of our history, of human history, which is both tragic and challenging, but it is a unified Trinity, as if in that unity we were expressing our own desire for harmony and communion with all that exists. Here in this map, we can see the locations in which her books and work were translated and sent to. Gebara's work was translated to English, French, Spanish, and German, which denotes how her ideas have traveled and influenced the world. Now, contextualizing the life and work of Gebara with other feminist religious figures, we can see a correlation between Gebara's and Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz experiences. Both women remained under the Roman Catholic tradition while resisting to be assimilated by the male-centered speeches, as well as both dared to confront the traditional concepts of the church and denied to conform to the patriarchal theology that was assumed to be universal by so many people. Now, talking about the work per se, in Latinas Evangélicas, the authors explore the individuality of spiritual experiences in correlation with the local context and sources of discrimination, which is central to Ivone Gebara's work as well. And finally, to reemphasize the power of education within our society, Gebara describes that working as an educator became a form of experiencing freedom for her. And in fact, learning about a female Brazilian theologian in class was so amazing that it was what drove me to pick Gebara to do this project on. Accordingly, Professor Matthews plays a key role in educating students on feminist perspectives upon the religion context of Point Loma Nazarene University, which also evoked freedom from many different pre-established religious ideas that I had encountered in my life. So, thank you very much for your teachings, Professor Matthews. These are the references I used to do this presentation. Thank you very much for watching. God bless you.